Sekeres Price for Tuesday, July 2nd, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center in downtown Vancouver. And for those hosting events in downtown Vancouver, the Wall Center has 55,000 square feet of striking indoor-outdoor space to book your next meeting or event. Contact the Wall sales at wallcenter.com. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, Grady Sass, hitting switches, conducting things. Big show coming up, including our poll question. Where, now that the dust has settled, on paper, are the Vancouver Canucks better today than they were at the start of the playoffs? Yes or no? You can vote at Sekeres Price on Twitter or X and YouTube. I voted no. I voted no because I think the weaker on defense, substituting Forbort or Desharnais for Zadorov and Cole. Needless to say, have lost something at center ice with Elias Lindholm making his way to Boston. And it's interesting because the phrasing at the playoffs, well, Artur Shilov's a much more known and better player now than he was at the start of the playoffs. Alas, even in goal, you're looking at a scenario where I'm not sure Yuri Patera is of Casey DeSmith standard right now. So no, but, and we talk about this with Harman Dayal later in the show, I didn't think there were many realistic pathways for them to get better, in part because they made the two trades in season without giving up much from the roster to add Zadorov and Lindholm. Some people are saying to me in the comments, this is not apples to apples compared to the beginning of last year,
right.
That roster.
That's the other thing.
Fair enough, and I think that's a closer comparison. There is more work to be done on this team. I suspect it's going to require the in-season treatment like last year, so we can have this discussion again at the trade deadline, where I suppose they will be better, certainly better than this, and maybe better than last year's team that entered the postseason.
It is apples to oranges to some degree. I think if you're going to the start of last season, it is much, much closer. I mean, how many teams did improve upon the way they closed the year in Game 82? The Nashville Predators and whom? Like, there's not many teams.
Honestly, even Nashville, they still have a center ice problem in Nashville, despite the wingers they added.
But the whole point is that the talent dissipates and spreads out over the summer, and then it starts to funnel into certain teams as the season goes on. So the Canucks have made sure that they've got a little bit of wiggle room here to make an additional move, probably via trade. And we're already seeing teams that are cap strapped making, like the Dallas Stars giving away Faksa. Other teams have done this sort of thing too, just giving away players at the bottom of the roster that, they're just trying to.
Kevin Hayes traded for future considerations along with a pick.
Yeah. So that, the Canucks are shooting higher than Hayes and Faksa, I think, in terms of what they want to acquire. So there will be a cost associated. But they're going to try to also get some sugar. Maybe they can extract the draft pick with this player as well that they acquire, and they can improve the depth. It's again, we had the bulk of the moves yesterday. It was a completely satisfactory day. They held their head above water. I think they are a very competitive team to start the year. And they didn't sink themselves in the long term. The long-term deals are for the best players. Like, I've got a lot less problem giving 7 years to Jake DeBrusk than I do 3 years to Tyler Myers. But really, the Tyler Myers quibble for me is 1 year too long. So it's hard to jump up and down and get red-faced over 1 year too long on a depth defense.
Did you vote yes or no on the poll?
I still voted no. It's factually no. But it's
because some are harsh, and we're going to talk about this some more in a bit and throughout the summer, but some are on it. If Alvin's going to come on out at that year-end season, end of year presser and spike a gauntlet like he did when the market is feeling really good about a second round 7-game performance in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and say, we haven't achieved anything, we got to get a lot better, this isn't our goal, not even halfway there, and then go out and have this free agency that those two things are incongruous.
But the Rome wasn't
That
built in a
he-
day. That insinuates that yesterday is the finality of this roster for not only the start of the season, or much less at the trade deadline. And neither one of those things is true. This is not the final roster, A, for the start of the season, and it's not the final roster, B, going into the playoffs.
Let me ask you this. Should they have peeled the third-round pick, beaten Tampa the punch, just for the ability to talk to Guentzel to see if they could have made that work?
No. Like, even with hindsight, I would say no, because I think that he just never was really that interested in coming here. So to me, that would have been throwing away the third-round pick.
Yeah, I agree that. I agree that they were a longer shot than many purported. I mean, we had people talking about they're the favorite to land Guentzel. I don't know about that.
Well, see, the team that is in arrears has to make the most noise. So they made the most noise to try to, and I don't mean publicly, I mean, they probably were calling the agent the most to try to, woo the player.
But what I would argue, if that's the case, then, noise only gets you so far. Action over words, and trading the pick, and then having the free ability to go talk to him and put on your full-scale push that you were hoping to make in the early hours of free agency. I mean, this is assuming there isn't, broad and deep tampering, because there's clearly tampering. Then that would have been a money where your mouth is scenario. Instead, it almost looks again like they're 1.5 feet in, all in, but not really all in.
But it's a thin draft, it's a thin draft pick organization right now anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you make that trade, Matt, and the other team signs him anyhow on July 1st. They put themselves in line for, I think they can get a pretty good temperature check on whether or not the player is seriously considering right up into the last second. Mm-hmm. And it's not worth peeling off the pick if your temperature check, if your whisperers, if you will, in the back room are telling you it doesn't look good. It sounds like he's trying to go X. So I'm going to trust that they had that reconnaissance and intelligence that it just was not worth it peeling off any pick for an exclusive window.
Let's get to our top story. The schedule is out for 24-25. For everybody making their plans already. 9 back-to-backs for the Vancouver Canucks, 3 Saturday matinees.
Yeah.
In fact, just one home game between January 26th and March 5th as we pause for the Four Nations tournament. They play 6 times, just 6 times in the first 17 nights, which means Rick Tocchet's going to get some practices in. We know how much Tock loves to practice. Connor Bedard will be here November 16th and again on March 15th. Let's hope he plays both those games after missing out in his hometown last year because of the broken jaw. Macklin Celebrini is here December 23rd and April 14th. Sidney Crosby. And how many more times are you going to see Sid?
Yeah.
October 26th. Alexander Ovechkin. How many times are you going to see Ovi? January 25th. And then our old friends from Boston, Nikita Zadorov, Elias Lindholm on December 14th. Interestingly, Sunday, November 17th, big day of sports in downtown Vancouver. The Grey Cup and 55,000 people will be at BC Place, and there'll be 18,000 next door at Rogers Arena when the Nashville Predators come to town.
It's
maybe don't want to drive into downtown Vancouver that day.
I've got them at 19 Saturday nights and 9 Sunday nights, which was interesting. Do you remember what that breakdown was? We've been monitoring the lack of Sundays, mostly at home.
Last year was the lack of Fridays. I think they played 2 or 3 Fridays the entirety of the schedule, and they were done with Fridays by like November. This year, there are many more Fridays. I didn't count them up. There are 2 6-game road trips, one in November, one in March. There are 2 5-game road trips, one in January, one in February. And there are 2 6-game homestands, both of them early in the season, November and December. It is not unusual to see Canadian teams have a majority of their home games prior to New Year's because the American teams don't love to play those home games while the NFL is still going on. They prefer home games in January through March when there is less competition, i.e., less National Football League going on in their markets. Have you counted the?
Yeah, they play 4 Friday night home games.
Mm-hmm.
They play 9 times on Friday nights.
Yeah,
but a lot of them are road games.
Yeah.
I
like the Friday night home game. They got away from it last year, but I like the Friday night home game.
But they're playing on Saturday a lot, which means they're going to get the marquee time.
Well,
slot.
And they have some Saturday matinees too. Now
on the road usually.
Well, Rogers likes to do the full days, right, of Saturday games. The Canucks haven't had a lot of those. Certainly didn't have a lot of those this past year. I mean, that's typically a Winnipeg game or an Ottawa game in the afternoon there.
Yeah.
So the Canucks have some of those this year. Saturday and Sunday. They got Sunday, 1 p.m. against Tampa. In December, they got a Saturday, December 28th, 1 p.m. against Seattle.
That's a home matinee.
Yeah, that's a home matinee. They got a Saturday at the New York Rangers, 1 p.m. on March 22nd. And then they have another Saturday home matinee, 1 p.m. against Anaheim on April 5th.
Yeah. Home matinees.
Home Saturday matinees, folks. Yep.
When was the last time we saw that?
Well, again, Rogers likes to roll out the full day of games, right? Like they don't want to always have.
Still, the Canucks haven't been tapped to do that.
No, they haven't.
4 o'clock, yes, but not one.
Right. Oftentimes it's Winnipeg. Oftentimes it's Ottawa playing in that early window on Sportsnet. Canucks are taking their turn this year. The season opens Wednesday, October 9th with a home game against Calgary. They'll face the Flyers on the Friday thereafter. And then through Florida, Tampa, Florida, Philly. Boy, it seems like they're forever going to play Philadelphia in October.
Well, it's the Eastern teams always, Eastern U.S. teams, because it's all the football markets trying to burn their games against Canadian teams because the Canadian teams don't bring in Gate anyway.
No.
So you might as well burn them when you're going to take the bitter pill against baseball and the NFL. So, yeah, this is customary. You're going to face the Eastern Conference U.S. teams all the time in October and November. And that's what you see there. The rest of October, after the opener versus Calgary, Philly, Tampa, Florida, Philly, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Carolina, New Jersey. And that's a mixture of home and away games, folks. It's October's hysterical. It's just you're an Eastern Conference team for the month of October.
And, of course, the Florida Panthers will have a banner raised.
Yes.
But not against the Canucks. They start their season at home on Tuesday, October 8th against Boston. So they'll raise the banner that night, and the Canucks will be the second team into Florida.
A Thursday nighter in Sunrise in front of 11,000 fans.
It's a good question because that's as fickle a sports market as there is.
Yeah.
Will it be like the Anaheim Ducks where you get a little bit of residual, this is great, blah, blah, blah. And then within a few years, the, hockey crowd thins out again?
When you're averaging 12,000
or less.
I don't know what they're averaging. Let's say they're averaging 13,000. Do they get to 14,000 next year? Yeah, probably. But I don't think it's going to be like all of a sudden they're selling out games. No, don't see it. What's weird is seeing the Utah badge on the calendar.
Utah. We should mention the Utah games. The Canucks face the Utah Hockey Club on December 18th in Salt Lake City. And the first time the Utah Hockey Club is here is in March. Do I have that right? Yes, March 16th for the still unnamed Utah Hockey Club.
And those are the only 2 dates with Utah this season?
No, I think they're also in Utah on February 23rd. Three games.
Yeah, there it is.
So there you have it. If you are interested, Montreal is here on Tuesday, March 11th. They're usually a draw. The Leafs are here Saturday, February 8th, and that is a 4 p.m. start.
As per usual.
Yeah. Speaking of Sid, apparently they're talking 3-year deal with Sid. We had wondered about that when July 1st comes and the dust settles and Sidney sizes up what he's looking at in terms of a team, would he sign an extension because he is eligible? He's got 1 year left on his deal. Or would he play out? And the reporting is that there's a 3-year deal being talked about there, but that's going to be interesting.
Dubas is also on record saying he doesn't know when they're going to be a contender again.
Right. Well, and
does Sidney really need to go down with a ship? I know people they love to see the same team all the way down on the back of the hockey card. But sorry.
He's won 3 cups there.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of the time they get the players just guilty of this as anybody else, saying, "Oh no, I'm gonna stop it." Mm-hmm. You've given that city a whole lot of joy. And I'm not saying he's coming to the Canucks, folks. I'm just saying this narrative that the players have to go down with the ship. If they want to stay and they just have no desire to move, whatever, fill your boots. But there should be no sense that anybody is disloyal or turning their back on a city because after 15, 17 seasons with a club, they think it might be time for a last second change of scenery. Like, come on, enough with that.
Do you think Miller or Pettersson will move to wing to make room for Sidney Crosby? or is JT Miller going to have to go that way, go home, so to speak?
I would be lying if I didn't do the exercise in my head this morning. I did for a second, and I realized that Pettersson would probably be the cost.
No, I think Miller would be the cost.
You think you're trading Miller? I don't think you can trade Miller. Petey's the one that doesn't have trade protection.
Miller's the Western PA, Eastern Ohio guy. I'd be going home. Anyways, we have plenty of time to talk about the Canucks acquisition of Sidney Crosby. Yeah. They know him from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Over the course of July and August. Let's hear from the general manager, Patrick Alvin, who met the media yesterday. I was a little delayed because they had one more signing to announce, and Vincent Desharnais. That's right. We'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
July 1st. It's the day when the rubber hits the road. It was a very responsible July 1st last year for the Vancouver Canucks. I think you can argue that the same this year. 2 years ago, in his first go-around on July 1st, Patrick Alvin made one of the bigger mistakes of his tenure in the Ilya Mikheyev signing. They have shed themselves of that contract.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually thinking, Heinen, Sherwood, and what they retained on Mikheyev equals roughly what Mikheyev was making.
So they turned one player into two, which is sort of what we thought would be the exercise, and they did it.
July 1st is when the rubber hits the road. Here's the Canucks GM.
The July 1st is a interesting day, but it's also a scary day. And I think we were pretty good here today in terms of managing our money and getting hopefully good value out of the players we got there.
It's not as big a roller coaster.
Honesty
That's
on
great.
his part.
It's a roller coaster for fans who are watching it. Oh, my team's being left in the dust.
Which we saw a lot of yesterday morning with the Canucks.
Right.
The Canucks fans.
So it's a roller coaster for them too, just not as scary as one probably, but it's great honesty. As you said, like it's a free for all. Mm-hmm. And the Anaheim Ducks didn't even participate in the exercise. Imagine being one of their fans right now. They literally did not participate.
Are they participating in the NHL this upcoming season, or are they going to continue to try and?
I talked to somebody that might
play
be in
the
know,
American Hockey League,
and I said, "What is the goal there? Is he laying in the weeds, ready to do something, Pat Verbeek?" And the answer I got was, "Nope, they're just not spending money yet.
Well,
it's going to be next year.
That's it.
They're just not. They're what's the point?
That's always been a budget team.
Yeah."
Which is why going way back when they forged a pretty good club, I always felt like Bob Murray wasn't quite aggressive enough in trying to top it up because there was only going to be so many opportunities. They've been a budget team. I mean, you talk about a team that doesn't do much in its market, like the television ratings for that team.
Right, no, the fans that are in the building are the fans.
Yeah,
that's it.
Honestly, I think you could put a live cam on the front gates of Disneyland and do a better number than what the Anaheim Ducks
Probably,
do.
Yeah, it's a good call.
It's a nice collection of young talent, and of course, he wants to trade Trevor Sekeres.
But would they have been silly to do what Chicago did? Like Chicago made these veteran moves that Chicago's going to be very competitive. Not going to be a contender, but the Chicago's got a chance to make the playoffs next year.
No.
Yes, they do. And I'm just thinking Anaheim probably could have done the same sort of thing.
Come on, Blake.
Did you see what Chicago did? Again, I'm not extolling them as a cup contender, but they've all of a sudden become a National Hockey League team again at the very least.
Yeah, you know what? Okay. Yeah.
They got all the $4 and $5 million players. They got all of them in the entire NHL and put them on one team.
Yeah. Anyways, I don't think you have to worry about Anaheim. I don't think you're going to have to worry about San Jose this year if you're a Canucks fan in division with those two teams. And frankly, I'm not sure you have to worry about the LA Kings so long as Rob Blake is going to be the general manager there, because I have not been a big I'm not really following what they're trying to do.
Don't get it.
I mean, Jeannot, but what you paid to get Jeannot, Orrin Fogel. I mean, I guess the Pierre-Luc Dubois move is positive, but is Kemper the fix to what ails you? And then the Edmondson contract, which we talked about yesterday, which is abhorrent. Okay, more good honesty from Patrick Alvin on the signing of Danton Heinen, Langley's Danton Heinen, because it became so clear in the postseason. Blake and I, Jeff, sitting here night after night going, so no changes again in Rick Tocchet's lineup? Like he's not even changing up the lines? Well, there was reason. He just didn't have a lot of bodies at his disposal. He didn't have a lot of depth. He didn't have a lot of versatility. That's where Alvin hopes Heinen will help. Take a listen.
Yeah, I think that was something we talked about. I felt, especially in the playoffs there, that we probably didn't have enough options for the coaches to move players around. And I think in Danton's case there, and Pius Suter, both of them are very capable of being players that you can move around in the lineup and play different positions. And Danton being a Vancouver kid as well, he definitely took a little bit of a less money to come home here and play for the Canucks, and he was extremely excited about it.
Yeah, and he was. We talked about that contract yesterday with the AFP Analytics projection on it being a year more than the 2-year deal, 3-year deal, and richer per season than what Heinen wind up signing for. So really good work there. And yes, a versatile player. And Alvin is wholly right. It was on the construction of the team that just did not give Tocchet a lot of ability to change things up when things started going poorly against the Edmonton Oilers. And then you lose Brock Besser to the blood clotting issue. And by the way, Alvin says that Brock is over that now and everything is full speed ahead. So that's good to hear about Besser's summer. But no, did not have the sort of versatile pieces that can move up the lineup and play with skill and be effective with skill players.
Because it was just, could you try Dakota Joshua in the top 6? Now you've got replicas of Dakota Joshua sort of in Heinen, and you've got DeBrusk, obviously, Garland, Suter, Höglander. There's more options to move around the pieces than they had last year. And that is assuming that none of the young players make a jump. And maybe none of them will ever, Matt. But God, wouldn't it be nice for one of these players to make a jump?
What I like about what they did yesterday, Blake, in signing the players they did. I mean, we talked about it here for the last couple of weeks. You were staring at a lineup that did not have NHL players in the bottom 6 that were carrying hope bet at best right now fringe guys. Now, if they have big summers and show that they're every night NHLers, great. But you can't go into July 1st going, Colson and Baines are absolutely going to be 82 game guys for us if they stay healthy next year. No way.
No
way could you make that calculation. So now I look at their, and again, I've been big on make sure you maintain depth, baseline next year's performance. They did just that. Like now, if you're going to play Heinen with, let's say you're going to play Heinen with Miller and Besser, DeBrusk, Pettersson, Höglander, then you got either Suter or Bluger to play between Joshua and Garland. One of them bumps down, plays fourth line with Sherwood, and that's where you get into your hope bet guy, whether that's Nils Zaman, whether that's Bud Colson, PDG, we'll see. But that's far superior than what they were looking at. And frankly, again, for me, where they would have been had they paid $9.5 million for Jake Guentzel. Because then you absolutely would be trying to get by with guys in the forward ranks and maybe on defense as well.
But some people would say that's okay if you got the special talents, right?
Well, and
it's just two different
theories.
I
mean, if you can tell me they're going to be healthy for 82 and fresh and ready to go for the playoffs, then I would concur.
Yeah.
But first you have to get there. Puck movers on defense. Look, tweeted yesterday, they are building a forest around Quinn Hughes. Already had 6'5", 210 Carson Soucy, 6'8", 229 Tyler Myers. You had 6'4", 219 Derek Forbort, 6'6", 209 Vincent Desharnais.
Given the playoffs we just saw, Matt, I don't mind this blue line in the playoffs, particularly if they get into a gritty series like the one we saw.
You need another puck mover, though.
To get you there.
So do you split Roenick and Hughes? Do you go out and find puck movers? Alvin was asked about puck movers yesterday. Here's what he said.
Is this a time you see if Roenick and Quinn should be separate and carry their own deep pair? I think those are the questions for training camp and as we move forward there. But I think you're right. There's something we talked about here. Do we need more puck movers on our team? But I still feel that the additions here today are capable of playing simple and with the structure we have, we anticipate to play fast hockey, and I think those guys are capable of delivering a first pass fast.
So like a Pesce, a Montour, a Tanev, I think you can put on the right side with Quinn Hughes and let Roenick carry one of the lefties. But if you, with this current group, put Roenick on the second pair, you're asking Tyler Myers to play first pair minutes?
Right.
Nope.
We all sort of looked at Eric Brandstrom, ex of the Ottawa Senators, who wasn't qualified, and thought, that's a puck mover who has some pretty decent underlines. He signs today with Colorado. And then the other sort of low-cost puck movers, Grady Pierre-Olivier Joseph from Pittsburgh.
Yep, Rutherford acquired him once already.
Right, and the other one was, help me out here.
We had discussed Adam Boqvist and Oliver Shillington, but I think he might be a little too expensive. And as Blake, we talked about off air, there's just a lot of risk there with where his mental health is at.
Right, you don't know if you're going to get the full season of games.
How about this, guys? Tyson Barrie.
Yeah, I looked at Tyson Barrie as well.
Yeah.
More power play specialist, I would argue, than puck mover. I mean, moves the puck when he's out there.
But if you're putting Barrie
in, he's not getting buried in his own zone.
But if you're putting Barrie and Forbort out there, you've got a skater and a non-skater. Maybe that works. Again, certain opponents. And Barry's probably not playing game one of the playoffs. But you need enough different looks for 82 games.
Right.
And maybe 84 next year or the year after.
But also, a player like Barrie basically allows you to do an experiment.
Yeah.
Right? And go, okay, is that the profile that we must have going forward? You look at him and you go, he's imperfect, but that profile, but better, fewer mistakes, better consistency. Is that something that has to be higher up the priority list for us in terms of in-season acquisition or next summer?
And guys, given what we're seeing around the league right now for the role-playing defenseman there, I mean, he's $1 million. I mean, Tyson Barrie should not be getting more than $1 million based on what we're seeing.
Again, he should be, and every player from here on out should be close to the variable salary in the minors.
How much is he playing, though?
1.2, 1.3. You can bury all of it in Abbotsford if need be. I'm for all of those contracts that you could, because they don't cost you anything other than the owner's money, and he's got plenty of it.
Last year he was a 30-point pace. The year before that, split between the Oilers and Predators, he had 55 points.
Points is what he does. Grady,
you signed Desharnais for $2 million. How often is he drawing into that lineup, would they be more inclined to go for a left shot guy who can kind of fill in more for Derek Forbort, who played in the AHL last year and is only making 1.5?
Derek Forbort played in the AHL? No, he didn't.
Yep.
I mean, on a rehab assignment. Was
that what it was?
Yeah. No, he's an NHLer through and through. No, the only time Derek Forbort missed time last year was when he was injured, and that's a rehab assignment there for 2 games.
Still, I do think you.
But think about it in this terms: if you sign Tyson Barrie for $1 million, you've got a $3 million position there that is shared between Desharnais and Barrie. I don't mind that. Depending on who you're playing or how they're playing, you can swap in and out those 2 guys.
We didn't talk about the Desharnais contract yesterday because it happened after we had ended the show, Blake. But I can't say I'm the biggest fan of it.
No, I'm not the biggest fan of it either.
You know, I like a monstrous shutdown right side D as much as the next guy, but
I didn't like him in the playoffs.
When we wrapped it yesterday, looking at the additions of everyone but Desharnais, I felt like the puck moving defenseman. And we talked about guys like Brandstrom, Gustafsson, Boquist, like, you know, that profile defenseman was what was lacking, and they didn't get there. Now, we know emphasis in this year's free agency was the penalty killing because guys like Lindholm and Zadorov were leaving, not to mention some of their domestic free agents were big penalty killers. Here's Alvin talking about how some of the moves on defense were designed to help continue to improve, because it did improve the penalty killing.
We felt that we still needed to make sure we had guys capable of playing penalty minutes there, and Forbort was a key piece there in Boston over the years. And after talking to Darren here this morning, we felt that there is even more upside. He hasn't been in the league for a long time. I think with the coaches I have here, and Adam Foote and Sergei Gonchar, I believe they can help him get to the next level.
And that is very fair. Vincent Desharnais is absolutely a late bloomer. So is Kiefer Sherwood. We're going to get to him in a second. But Desharnais has played just 114 National Hockey League games.
He was a full degree
guy. 4-year guy at Providence College. Like Dakota Joshua, spent some time skating in the ECHL. You don't typically find a lot of NHLers outside of goaltenders who play in the ECHL. And because of his profile, he's, you know, forever going to be limited as a third pair big defenseman. Edmonton called him up, and I say he's played 114 games, so he's played 28 playoff games as well.
That's unbelievable.
Those count too. 142.
BCHL kid too, by the way.
Yeah, so it's possible with Chilliwack. So it is possible.
Well, and especially with Adam Foote and Gonchar and what they did for Myers last year, and kind of, you know, getting these guys to buy in and protecting the middle of the ice.
Good luck getting pucks on net, guys. Like these are redwoods that are stout redwoods as well. Like there's gonna be a lot of block shots.
To quote Tony Gallagher, there's a lot of human matter.
Yes,
in front of the goal.
Yeah,
plenty of atoms there, not holograms.
No, actual mass.
And you know, Desharnais and Kiefer Sherwood. You know, remember when he talked about the next Dakota Joshua? Well, you've got a couple of guys here who could qualify in that regard, because Sherwood is also a late bloomer, has but 195 games NHL experience, including 8 in the postseason. This was really, this past year, his first full NHL season. He did play 50 games for Anaheim back in 2018, 2019. But this is his first, and, you know, like Joshua has bounced around organizations too: Anaheim, Colorado, Nashville, and now Vancouver. 27 points in 68 games this past year. And as we know, he was effective against the Canucks. And yesterday he was talking about how he loves being a pest. Take a listen.
Yeah, I think, you know, business is business. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you're with. You know, I want to make it hard to play against for the other team. So now I'm excited to do that, you know, with my new teammates. And at the end of the day, I think it's a sign of respect and honor, because, you know, obviously you try to get the best players off their game. And Some guys are a little harder to do that than others, but there's multiple ways you can do that, whether it's physically or verbally or whatnot. But I just, like I said, I want to fit into the team as best I can with the style, and make Vancouver a hard place to play against, and just an identity. I want to keep feeding that identity and kind of add some fire to that lineup.
The hardest thing for even a role player is consistency. And the hardest thing is to become known because of something you've done in the playoffs over a small sample size. And then you've got the microscope on you from the fan base that says, hey, do that for 82 games. So that's going to be the challenge for Kiefer Sherwood, is to have the efficiency and the throttle perfected that he can make a difference on a lot of nights in his own way, not on the score sheet, but in his own way, but also not burn himself out and be crap from January to March. It's going to be tough, but just having a player with that skill set, it's a plus for the Vancouver Canucks, especially come playoff time. But they need to make sure a lot of these guys have their tanks full come playoff time.
Alvin talked about how he could be the bumper player on power play 2.
Ambitious.
Well, apparently has a much better shot than what you might think.
High shot rate last year.
Yeah, and pretty good goals per 60. Again, 10 goals in a limited role, 68 games too. So he didn't play the full 82. And the year before, 7 goals in 32 games, which is also decent.
Well, and his AHL rate is very good.
Oh, yes.
36 and 57 2 years ago, 22 goals in 42 games.
10 and 10 the previous year.
Yeah.
That's a lot of AHL goals there.
Most rush attempts on the Preds last year. Canucks, one of the worst teams, if not the worst, at rush chances last year.
No doubt.
That will help. Third best shot rate on the Preds, high individual expected goals. So the underlines check out 2 years, suggest that, you give this guy a little more ice time. He's over 12 minutes last year, 27 points. That's pretty good.
And here's the other thing.
68 games.
The guy's going to turn 30 next March. Much like Dakota Joshua. So Dakota Joshua, they identify him. They go, we think he's a better player than what he has been, what is shown to date. We think he's an NHL regular. He plays his first year as an NHL regular. He comes back. Maybe he feels like he's a bit more of a made man. Tocchet gets up in the grill, lets him know, no, you're not. I will healthy scratch you if I need to. And then from that moment on, Joshua turned the corner. Sherwood talked yesterday about he doesn't take anything for granted. Like, he understands when you look at that hockey card and the number of places that he has played, he understands that he's got to be a consistent, as you were talking about, Blake, player, and has had to discover things that work for him and that allow him to continue being an NHL player.
He's a 29-year-old. He doesn't, and so for that age, he doesn't have many miles under his belt at the NHL level, which is good.
Let's hear from him.
I don't think you ever feel like you make it. I think for me, I just try to make the most of every day and earn the next day. It's kind of always been my mindset, and just taking one day at a time, and just try to scrap and claw for every opportunity. But I think I found kind of what works and what is hard to play against for other people. So I try to focus on that, and at the end of the day, I think when the team does well, like I said, it helps everyone else. So if I can be hard to play against for everyone else, then hopefully the other guys can get some more opportunities, and we can hopefully have more wins down the road.
JT Miller should be happy too. This is an Eastern Ohio guy, Columbus born, Cleveland junior, minor hockey.
Him and Joshua
Youngstown, might be tough town. Youngstown, Ohio.
Bash brothers next year. Joshua and him throwing the body around.
A bunch of 2-year deals. I'm just looking, guys. A bunch of 2-year deals handed out in free agency, including Kiefer Sherwood. So 3 years from now. So a lot of these guys are staying for 2 seasons. The year after that, the Canucks have 7 players under contract.
Well, some of that is CBA related.
For sure. It's CBA related. It's OEL cap related because of that third year is the second chubby year of OEL money.
It's Demko contract related. Yeah.
And Brock Besser will probably in the next 4 months add to that.
Well, Besser is a story for another show, but he was asked yesterday again about, will you start talking with Brock, and very much sort of kicked it in season. I don't think they want to insult Brock or get on the wrong side there, but by the same token, I think
they want 2 more months of evidence.
They want to see more from Brock before they're willing to re-up, given the freight that Brock's going to be able to command if he approaches 40 goals again. Derek Forbort. DeBrusk said yesterday that, he's kind of a different guy, kind of a guy you have to get used to. He,
which is not like a super flattering review, by the way.
He was not verbose yesterday, and he's not a fancy player either. He's asked to describe his game. Take a listen.
I think of myself as kind of like a hard-nosed, kind of simple penalty-killing defenseman, and kind of sounds like that's what they were looking for, so it's a good fit.
That's it. That's all. That's what you get.
Duluth, Minnesota, born. Therefore, boy, very American team.
Not a lot of frosting on the cake.
No,
yeah, very American team. You're right. By the way, did you hear Grady scramble for that clip?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's got to be listening today.
See, lots of clips.
I usually, before I introduce the clip, I usually say we're going to hear from so-and-so in a moment. A few sentences of context, which is designed to allow Grady to get the clip ready to instantly fire.
It's a good bus driver.
Thank you, Blake. That time in there. I don't think he's paying attention. Let's ask for the clip now.
Yeah, sometimes
you heard the Matt scramble, right?
Yeah.
There was a yard sale, things flying off the table.
Taking people behind the curtain here, aren't we?
Yeah, we sure are.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. I think they overpaid for DeBrusk. Because they were scrambling. I don't for
on the AAV or just the German.
I don't for a second buy that he was the priority. Come on. Like, I can't believe someone with the Canucks is trying to sell that today.
Well,
we all know Guentzel. What they might mean is after Guentzel re-signed with Tampa, he was the priority.
Well, I think what the nuance there is, Matt, is we were pretty sure we weren't going to get Guentzel.
Well, okay. So
what they overpay though?
They overpaid in term. Yeah, they overpaid in term. They also overpaid when you look at that second tier of wingers and what they went for. Now, I don't mind the contract quite like the player. But when I stack it beside some of the other deals that were signed in free agency, and look, all of these players have different profiles and skill sets.
Like Adam Henrique's contract in Edmonton. He's not signing that deal anywhere else in the National Hockey League.
And the same is probably true for Victor Arvidsson.
Yes.
Now, what I'd say about Arvidsson is that's a right shot guy. So can he play in the bumper of your first power play? Probably not, unless you're going to move JT Miller away from, into the bumper and out of his favorite spot and run it through Pettersson. So I can understand why, he wasn't the perfect fit for him. And look, coming off a injury, Arvidsson, but that's a pretty sensible contract. And of course they can say, hey, come play with Connor McDavid, even if, a lot of guys aren't going to play with Connor McDavid, but a 2-year, $4 million per year deal on Arvidsson, that's pretty good business. A 1-year, $3 million deal on Jeff Skinner, that's also really good business. I mentioned I like the Teravainen contract, 3 years at 5.4, because that's not a lot of term for a younger player, now more of a creator than he is a finisher. And of course, Mantha, who just gets the 1 year. Harman Dayal, we got Harm on the show. Oilers are signing Arvidsson, Henrique, Skinner for a combined $10 million cat hit without going longer than 2 years on term with any of them. That's very strong.
The Edmonton signings have to be taken completely out of the mix here, because every free agent that said that was getting any sort of courting from the Oilers goes, I saw how close they were. Yeah. And I see them doing other business. I'm going to win a Stanley Cup if I sign there. So I'm going to make this really easy on them. So I think you have to extract that. The Teravainen deal in Chicago's a good exhibit A for you.
Well, Mantha too, 1 year at whatever it was in Calgary, 3-5.
Yeah, I don't even understand that one.
No,
Like,
I
don't
mean,
understand that
I
motivation
know
at all.
Mantha has had some issues in the past, but I thought he had a better year than have to bet on himself at age 29 on a $3.5 million 1 year deal.
Yeah, I'm very shocked by that deal. But I don't love
because he signed that early too.
But I don't love the player. So from a Canuck fan perspective, I wouldn't be jealous of that because I think they've got a way better player in Jake DeBrusk. Mantha's not defensively,
he's a decent defensive player.
Yeah. They'll flip him. 1 year contract.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure they'll flip him.
Yeah.
For sure they'll flip him.
So you say too long on the term with DeBrusk.
Yep.
Would you have preferred, 5-6 years, but with a higher AAV?
Yeah, no, I understand that's the calculation.
Because he's one of the youngest free agents.
I understand that's the calculation. Yes.
One of the youngest free agents in the class.
Yes,
right?
and they're still getting out before age 35.
Yeah.
But I do think what happened here is they didn't get Guentzel. Wingers started going off the board, and they...
See, I think in 5 years' time...
they moved.
I think there's a chance in 5 years' time that's a valued contract.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
I'm with you.
Yeah,
in 5 years' time, 5.5 is going to seem really cheap.
Well, we'll see how the player ages, but there's a chance of that.
And his production in Boston to date, he wasn't even playing 17 minutes a game.
Nope, 16-24 last year.
So you prop him up to 19-ish, 20ish minutes.
Yeah,
with
not 20.
But here and there,
it's hard to get 20 minutes.
The one thing I would say though is
power play time.
I think Bruce Cassidy is an exceptional coach.
Yeah, and there was some disconnect.
I think when a coach the caliber of Cassidy isn't playing a guy more, it's probably the player more than it is the coach. And frankly, Montgomery's done a very good job there in Boston. And Alvin talked about how, Boston is an organization they've looked at in terms of culture and details and that I know some Canucks fans don't want to hear that, but there have been a couple of really good coaches there. Don Sweeney, for my money, is one of the best executives in the National Hockey League. So there is a little bit of me that looks at it and goes, how come he didn't play more in Boston? How come there were always trade rumors about him in Boston? And how come Boston was willing to let this guy go, even though, Boston had some pretty significant needs up front, albeit more so at center.
What you're talking about, though, in terms of coaches, that's a bigger concern for me when the numbers at 14 minutes. Why is that guy only getting 14 minutes? He's playing 16 and a half. That is an acceptable amount of time. Cassidy only had him as a 25 and under player too.
Fair.
So he's a younger player under Bruce Cassidy, and he's still got 16 minutes under Bruce Cassidy. So that's actually pretty good for a 25 and under player.
Oh, and he's also playing with two pretty defensively responsible guys with Bergeron and Krejci and odd shift with Marchand. So
yeah, I mean that could be,
but
that could
how
be
much
to
is
me.
that?
That could be comparable to what he's going to find here, and that Rick Tocchet hasn't played an open style of game. He says he'll open it up a little bit more,
but he was signed to be that winger that we've all been hoping Elias Pettersson gets. So the natural progression suggests that he's going to have a little more, responsibility in Vancouver to thrive.
And guys, he had 2 shorties last year. Imagine shorthanded goals.
They get a lot of shorties.
I think it'd be nice to see a few shorthanded goals, but you need speed.
Did they not get many shorties last year? Or was 2 years ago they got all the shorties?
Yeah, with Miller and Pettersson.
Right. Darren Dreger says the Canucks went to $5 million on Zadorov, which means one of two things. Either they didn't go to 6 years of term,
which stands to reason,
or Nikita Zadorov chose Boston over Vancouver. You think it's door number? You think it's the first door? Column A. Didn't go to 6 years.
Yeah, although what was the AV in Boston?
6 times 5.
I mean, at 5 times 5 though, isn't the hometown discount just giving up the year, or is that just too steep a hometown discount?
Well, it's
because if you're
$5 million as he sees it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
total money.
I guess he's saying if it's 5 years, I'm 5.25 or something to that effect. I love the player a ton. He's just not a $5.5 million player for me. And so if that's what was needed, the Canucks did the right thing.
So what would you rather have, a Zadorov at his price or Myers and Desharnais? Now it's right side, so it complicates things. But I've seen a lot of Canucks fans say, "Oh, well, they could have signed this guy with the money," and then it also goes back to, well, you don't know which free agent actually wants to come here or not, or sees as a fit.
Completely.
So it's a tough exercise.
If we're playing that game, I'd rather Pesci and Juleson. That's what I'd rather have.
Yeah.
Okay, so look, I think they did a good job in free agency. We did letter grades yesterday. I gave them a B. We'll tell you the results of that poll question a little later. But there is a loud segment of Canucks Twitter that is unhappy with this work because they feel like Alvin didn't put his money where his mouth was in that year-end presser where he talked about how, they're not satisfied. There's got to be more ambition here. Their eyes on a Stanley Cup, not just making it to 2 rounds of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Here's Emmett, who tweeted at me. How is everyone happy about this? We couldn't score off the rush this year because when Hughes and Roenick weren't on the ice, all we did were high flip outs of the zone right to the other team. This needs to be addressed. This is the real issue.
So in the playoffs, I didn't see that in the regular season. I disagree with that in the regular season. They've got forwards that can carry the puck now. There's more speed on the forward line than they had last year, so that aids in that. And I think you're ignoring that Myers can make a pretty decent first pass to get out of the zone, and Susie as well. I don't know that I trust that so much with Forbort and Desharnais, but the other guys, I mean, they're not Hughes and Roenick. No one's saying that they are, but they are not granite block, flip the puck at every opportunity. So, hey, I'm on the record. They are a top 4 defenseman short, for sure they are. But again,
they're a top 6 or middle 6 forward short too.
It's July 2nd. I would bet that one of those two needs, your point and my point, one of those two needs, I would bet is done by opening night.
Really?
Yeah. Via a trade. And
what are they trading though, Blake?
I don't know.
Yeah. I see, because I think if you're filling a top 6 or a top 4 role, you're giving up something of substance. And I just don't see them doing that with Wielander or Lekramaki by the opening night of the season. I could see that in season once they have some evidence that, yes, they have a good team again that's marching towards the
and that might be true too. But I think you can also look around find cap strap teams that have an aging defenseman, but a quality one that they would rather reset a little bit on.
Yeah. Alex Burrows is leaving Montreal Canadiens bench and moving into a player development role. Prediction, hot take. Alex Burrows will be the next head coach of the Vancouver Canucks.
Whoa.
This will be years from now because Tocchet has built himself up some equity and will get a chance to play this out over multiple years. But the owner loves Burrows. Burrows will be the next head coach of the Canucks.
He says he wants to spend more time with family. So the timing might work out and that he gets to, spend some time with the family for a handful of years while Tocchet's reign is over. And then, 5-6 years down the road, perhaps.
Then I wanted to get to this because this also broke after we finished our show yesterday. Stan Bowman, Al McIsaac, and Joel Quenneville have now been reinstated by the National Hockey League. Or did we talk about this?
We did talk about it yesterday.
Bowman, broke late. Bowman may well be the general manager of the Edmonton Oilers. Ian Kennedy in the Hockey News. The biggest story of NHL free agency for every outlet today should be the NHL reinstating 3 men who actively covered up sexual assault. The NHL releasing this news in the middle of what they know is an annual media frenzy is an extension of this cover-up.
Yeah.
Period. Well said, Ian.
Yeah. And for those wondering why, we all make mistakes. The thing is, their mistake allowed Brad Aldrich to move on to a next location, a secondary location, and commit assault again. So if they had acted, that gets eliminated. I have a smidge of sympathy of the panic that those guys probably felt when they realized it, but they need to act. They needed to act and they didn't. And
they didn't want to distract from their Stanley Cup run.
Yeah. And so is this a long enough time on the sidelines.
Well, again, for Quenneville, it's going to mean he's not going to start the season as an NHL head coach, although I suspect he will get a job in season when there are some firings. Although, I'll say this, a lot of teams have turned over their head coach. Like there's going to be guys who are given a long leash in season because of the fact that they're so new.
Yeah.
Right? Like we saw so many coaching changes that I don't think you're going to see teams quick to make another coaching change. Let's get to today's menu, brought to you by Greta. Greta 50 West Cordova, quick walk to the rink or stadium, go-to spot for food, drink, fun. They have the amazing arcade before, after the game. Make it a game night at Greta, 50 West Cordova, or at gretabar.com. Harman Dayal's going to join us here of The Athletic and Canucks Conversation. Go over the Canucks at free agency and what needs to be done. John Shannon is going to join us. Yes, more Canucks at free agency. Also, a look back on the draft weekend and the Hall of Fame class of 2024.
Spicy.
Let's get to our Bet365 bets of the day. And for me, it's more information than it is putting my nickel down here, Blake. But the odds are out to win the 2025 Stanley Cup. These are the post-July 1st odds.
Okay.
And the favorite, the betting favorite to win the Cup is
the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Oh, what?
The Edmonton Oilers at plus 850. Well done, Grady. Slightly better than the Florida Panthers, the second choice at
They're not going
900.
to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals. No chance.
Hey, Florida team has been in there for how many years now?
Yeah.
The Canucks and Leafs are tied as the 8th choice at plus 1400.
The Canucks and Leafs?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Canucks and Leafs, as of this morning, were the same odds by Bet365 to win it all next year. So if you like the Canucks at 14-1, there you go. At Bet365.
I am surprised at the Canucks and Leafs. I mean, in reality, that might be the case, but I'm surprised that the betting doesn't reflect.
Well, typically what will happen from here, as Grady can attest, is something will go on that gets Leafs fans excited. They will rush to
OEL and Chris Tanev, baby.
They will bet the Leafs, and the Leafs odds will shorten because of the money coming in on them. So there's no value on the Leafs. Hasn't been since 1967 in this particular bet, actually.
I'm going to look ahead to England, Switzerland on the weekend. Saturday.
Do you like the Swiss here? Is this where this is going?
Hope Swiss.
I'm not. What I'm going to say is this goes past 90 minutes.
Yeah, I like those bets.
Plus 200. Have you noticed that in both these tournaments, boy, there's been a lot of 0-0 of late.
Well, today could have been 17-0 for the Dutch, the way they play. That was extraordinary.
But I think the Swiss will muck it up. Some of these big teams have had trouble scoring, not named Spain.
Well, here's the thing about England. Like, Harry Kane is not the Harry Kane of old.
No.
He's still a big guy. The header goal, the winner is, but he's not the guy who's going to score goals like, way back Harry Kane. And then outside of that, besides Bellingham, they're just not very dangerous.
I'm sure somewhere, like I would like to go. Okay, so 0-0.
Like don't get me wrong. I'm cheering for England. I'm a quarter English. That's good enough. But, I take a look at these other teams that are out there, Blake. Like, I think I would take every one right now over England based on what I've seen. I'm certainly, and I know Portugal had a big scare yesterday, but I am certainly taking Spain, Germany, and France over England if they're playing tomorrow.
0-0 is plus 550. I'd be tempted on that too.
There you go. Dutch too. Those are your Bet365 bets of the day. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS when opening that account. Harman Dayal is next.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
This is brought to you by the Arnold Palmer designed Whistler Golf Club. Off to an incredible start here in 2024. Amazing reviews, both the course and the service, and reminding group organizers of 12 or more. It is not too early to get your September and October buddy or corporate trips booked. Do it right now. Primetime's filling up fast. You, the group organizer, of course, plays for free. Tell us about your group at whistlergolf.com/groups. Well, our next guest is the co-host of Canucks Conversation. He covers the Vancouver Canucks for The Athletic, and yesterday was TSN's man on the spot as the Vancouver Canucks made their way through free agency. Our pleasure to welcome King of all media, Harman Dayal.
Yeah.
Back to Sekeres Price. How you doing?
Doing great. I think that's the best intro anybody's ever given me. So very, very, I don't know about King of Media, but we'll work at it one step at a time, right?
It was perfect timing. You are a free agent available for hire, and you worked free agent frenzy. It was just meant to be.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Some news here. I'll be interested to see how many million Harman Dayal gets here.
That's right.
In the next wave of free agency.
Anyways, maybe $1 million pesos.
We saw you pinch hitting for Farhan yesterday. Amazing job. Very well done.
Thank you.
DeBrusk. You know, Harm, good player. I think everybody likes the player. I take a look at what some of those other wingers went for it yesterday, and do notice the distinction between DeBrusk getting the 7 years and other guys getting much less than that. But I guess it's about fit with Elias Pettersson, and I guess it's about power play fit as well. What did you make of the contract, comparatively speaking, and what do you make of the fit with this player?
Yeah, the contract's a little bit long at 7 years for sure, but that's pretty standard when you're in the market for July 1st. And some of the other contracts that you may point at is sort of being shorter than that. Toffoli at 4 years, well, he was 32 years old, right? Whereas DeBrusk is 27. You look at Teravainen, for example, getting 3 years, I believe, in Chicago. Well, he's going back to a destination that he's already kind of familiar with. That's a bit of an advantage. Or you look at Arvidsson, the 2 years going to Edmonton. It's a little bit different because he's coming off an injury-prone year, and what a sales pitch for the Oilers to make that, hey, we've got a right-wing spot for you next to Leon Draisaitl. Come rehab your value and play on a team that got to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. So for the Canucks, once the top names flew off the board, I really liked that they went after DeBrusk as their sort of plan B or plan C target. And I think the cap hit is really reasonable. I think he's got some upside just in the sense that the last time DeBrusk played with an elite center was the 2022-23 season, where he scored around 27 goals in just under 70 games, was clipping it around a 60-point pace. So there could be more upside beyond what he produced last season. And I like the speed. I like the defensive attributes that he brings to the table, the edge. He can play in straight lines. This is a player that is 100% going to fit with the way that Rick Tocchet wants his players to play. So I really like that fit. And then the only sort of unknown is hopefully he can develop some chemistry with Pettersson specifically. If not, I'm sure that he'd be a fit with Miller.
Hey, Harm, was something lost when they didn't get Guentzel? Like, would you have been for trading a future third-round pick and paying Guentzel $9.5 million on a 7-year deal? Is something lost by them not being able to achieve that?
Yeah, I mean, he would have been an elite difference maker at the top of your lineup. Of course, you may not have had as much money to make depth acquisitions and fill out the rest of your roster. But yeah, he would have been a game changer, and I think the type of elite goal scorer that can really propel a team forward. Now, I don't think it's as simple as just trade for his rights, and he would have wanted to sign here, because we've seen plenty of examples of teams trading for players' rights and it not working out. And I think if a team, put it this way, Tampa must have been reasonably confident that Guentzel was going to go there before they even made the trade. And it's hard to compete with the no state tax thing, right? $9 million in Tampa. What does that number on a long-term deal look like in Vancouver, where the taxes are much higher? So I don't know if Guentzel was ever really a realistic possibility because of that. Once Tampa cleared all that cap room, it would have been nice, but ultimately with the options that the Canucks had at their disposal, I thought they did pretty well in landing a decent running mate for Elias Pettersson.
He's a defensive, plus player as well. Is that a shutdown line now? If Pettersson and DeBrusk are together, are they the ones getting the tough assignments? And does it matter then who the third player is on that line?
Well, part of it may depend on which line Tocchet plays Höglander on. If Höglander's in the top six, because if Höglander is playing with Pettersson, then I don't imagine he'll be using that line in a matchup role, just because I don't think the trust is fully there with Höglander yet going up against the opposition's best players. I would imagine as a default, just because Tocchet still has so much trust in JT Miller. We saw how successful he was for some stretches against the Connor McDavid line in the second round of the playoffs, plus how much Brock Besser has worked on developing his all-around game. I still think Tocchet would view the JT Miller line as his go-to going up against top matchups type line.
Is there a chance that the Vancouver Canucks still have a big splash left in them, do you think? Is there a chance that they've got a defenseman coming, something else up their sleeve? Jim Rutherford tends to like to make big splashes. I don't know that Jake DeBrusk is a big splash.
Yeah, it may not necessarily happen now, but at any point between now and the trade deadline, if this team takes on the type of profile that they did last year, where they look like a team that can do some damage in the playoffs, then absolutely. I imagine they'll try to make a splash, because when I look at the back end, for example, that blue line worries me a little bit. I think it's fine in the sense that if you started with it come October, you're not going to fall off the map. You're still going to be on track to be a playoff team. But if you want to make a deep postseason run, ideally you're not starting with Myers in a top four role. And I like the size that they've targeted, but I wonder if they have enough puck moving, because when you stack Hughes and Hronek together on the first pair, the second and third pairs, I don't see enough speed and just the ability to get out of your own zone. I'm not even talking about generating offense necessarily, but you can acquire that piece. I mean, whether it's deeper in July, in November, like the Zadorov trade, at the trade deadline, like there's time for them to make some type of extra significant addition. I expect that to happen. Is it going to happen this summer? I can't say that with certainty. And now you sort of have to also walk the line of, they are already in a position where they're cutting into LTIR room. So do they want to try and find a way to be creative, get off LTIR so that they accrue cap space in the regular season and then make an in-season move? There's different ways of going about it, and I can't predict timing. But yeah, I would suspect that management still has a significant move to make at some point.
If this is the 6 or 7 defensemen they're going in with, would you split Hronek and Hughes, Harm?
Not as a plan A. I think they're just so good together. And when you look at the advantage that Hughes and Hronek gave the Canucks, a plus 30 goal differential at 5-on-5, which for most of the season was the best among all top pair defensemen in the NHL. That's a massive competitive advantage. Hughes winning the Norris Trophy, I don't think it's a coincidence that he took that next step with Hronek by his side. I don't want to saddle Hughes with whether it's Tyler Myers or Vincent Desharnais, because I think those players would take something off the table for Hughes in terms of what he can do offensively. So not as a plan A, but hey, you may run into a spot where if it is, if your bottom four doesn't have enough speed, doesn't have enough puck moving, then maybe you need Hronek to stabilize a second pair. That can be a plan B option. But I just think Hughes and Hronek are too good together, and it gives you an elite top pair. I think those differences at the top of the lineup matter.
Could you not have combined a couple of the depth defensemen that they signed and had an elite defenseman? And it takes two to tango. You can't just do that.
Maybe not elites, but
one of the bigger name defensemen.
Legit top 4.
You need them to want to come. So it's not like you can just say, oh, make that equation and say, why didn't you just combine those two guys and get so-and-so? That so-and-so needs to want to come here, whether it's Montour or Pesce or whoever. but you hope that they considered that, don't you, Harm, that to bring in one other legit top 4 defenseman?
Yeah, again, if they want to go deep in the playoffs, they're going to need that. And especially once you get into the postseason, you're going to run into teams that are so quick and so heavy on the forecheck, and so much of the battle. Look at the Edmonton series. I feel like whatever team controlled the run of play and spent more time in the offensive zone was the team that could break the puck out better from the defensive zone. Edmonton ran into issues at times against Vancouver's heavy forecheck. Vancouver ran into troubles at times against Edmonton's heavy forecheck. And you look at the other teams that went deep in the playoffs. Dallas is a really good forecheck. Florida has probably the best forecheck in the NHL. So you're going to, it's not just about having the meat and potatoes and the size to defend the inside and win net front battles. That is extremely important, but you also need players that on defensive zone retrievals are agile enough to, again, not that I'm expecting these guys to skate the puck out like Quinn Hughes, but just beat a forechecker to the puck, make a simple backhand 10-foot pass and get the breakout going, which now that the Canucks have more speed on the wings, if they can just add one more top 4 defender, I feel confident about how the decor is shaping up. And yet at the same time, I'll say this, with the structure that they play, it's actually surprised me how well the bottom 4 performed last season, right? Like on paper, a Susie Myers pair doesn't, like, I like Susie a lot, but when you think about contending teams' second pairs, it doesn't excite you on paper, and yet it mostly worked. It was fine. It wasn't like this major problem. So I think the back end, put it this way, if they start with this back end this fall, this September, this is what they roll out with, they'll be fine. Come the trade deadline, I think they'll need to add a piece.
Yep, much like they did last year. Some in-season work was required. Zadorov, Lindholm, of course, you have to have assets to make that happen, and we know they're not flush with that. Harm, on the forecheck thing, is that what the game is amounting to these days? Just, I mean, maybe outside of the LA Kings and their passive 1-3-1, who's got the better forecheck and who's got defensemen who can beat the forecheck to the punch, so to speak? Is that effectively what NHL hockey and who wins and who loses is boiling down to these days?
A lot of it is. I wouldn't say it's there's more to it than that, because I look at a team like the Hurricanes where they have those forecheck elements, they have a mobile decor, and yet what they haven't had for a while up until acquiring Guentzel at the deadline, and even then it didn't quite work, is elite scoring, right? And especially you need your power play clicking, which the Canucks power play was up and down through the second half and through the postseason. And when you look at a team like Carolina that had those two ingredients that you mentioned, why they fell short in the playoffs, well, their special teams got annihilated by the Rangers, not just beaten, annihilated. And same thing with the Oilers, the power play percentages that they were riding, but also the PK rocking at over 90%. That's a massive reason why they were able to get to the Stanley Cup final, despite at 5-on-5. In a lot of these series, they're around break even in terms of goal differential. So I think if you can combine the high-end forecheck, ability to move the puck, have enough offensive pop at the top of your lineup, and you've got special teams, that's a really strong foundation for going deep in the playoffs.
Is there more chances off the rush with this team as you see it right now? Because that was something that came up as well, both in terms of entertainment and also in terms of having a diverse attack. Do you see this group being any more capable of chances off the rush?
DeBrusk definitely checks that box. Watching him at times during Boston's playoff run, he's got the speed. He can drive zone entries. He's not going to do it on an every shift basis, but he's got the wheels to make an impact, to carry the puck into the offensive zone with possession, transport it up the ice. They're a quicker team, and I'm really curious to see how Tocchet is potentially going to open the system up a little bit, because in his first season coming to Vancouver, the first priority at all costs would have been, we got to clean up the defensive environment, and he successfully did that. Now it's about, can I inch the dial up, opening things up offensively, especially off the rush, without losing the defensive solidity that makes us so hard to score on. So part of it, yeah, DeBrusk checks that box. I do think the other side of it is going to be systematically, Are they going to open things up slightly? Now, in terms of creating off the rush, a huge part of it is also your defenseman joining as a second layer of attack, oftentimes as a trailer. Again, in the bottom four, I don't see enough of that because I'm not expecting Forbort, Desharnais, Soucy and Myers, those types of guys to consistently join the rush. And I think that is personnel-wise, again, something that may hold you back. But with this Canucks team, you're not looking to go from one of the worst rush teams offensively, statistically, to overnight you want them to be top 10. Even a marginal improvement, even if you can, not even getting to league average, but if you're, let's say, ranking 19th next year in terms of rush chances, that's going to be a significant improvement. And when you pair it with what this team does off the forecheck, does off the cycle, does in zone, that would give you huge gains offensively.
Harm, Sherwood, Heinen, which one do you like better and why?
I love both. Can I say both?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, I was banging the drum on Heinen on Canucks Conversation for a while there. I just really love how versatile he can be, moving up and down the lineup, defensively responsible. He's got some wheels. He can play a sort of similar role as Pia Suter, where Suter's likely shifting to center. So you're looking for a guy that can be the third wheel on a line, isn't going to be the most exciting or flashy driving play, but can give you 15 plus goals. Somebody that Tocchet can trust defensively and can use anywhere in the lineup. That's what Heinen gives you. And Sherwood, I mean, he was just such a pain in the neck to play against in the playoffs. Gives you pace, gives you grit, and helps give that fourth line some identity. That's one thing that when I look at last season, I felt like the Canucks fourth line didn't have enough of. Was okay, maybe one guy like a Lafferty might have given you wheels, but he wasn't very physical down the stretch in the playoffs. Or Phil DiGiuseppe, again, he can forecheck all right, but doesn't really give you that distinct identity that I think Sherwood gives you. So I'm really excited about his addition, and he gives you some secondary pop as well. 10 goals and 27 points when you're playing on a fourth line in around 70 games is nothing to scoff at.
Does the Joshua signing look a little bit better in lieu of what happened yesterday?
Absolutely. I mean, Trennan getting $3.5 million per year for 4 years going to Minnesota. Joshua was a clear step above Trennan for me, even though I really like Trennan. The Tanner Jeannot trade as well. The Kings paying a significant price to acquire a guy that hasn't really scored much the last couple of years. Even the Beck Malstein trade. These big bodies that can forecheck, that hit hard, that give you secondary offense are really coveted. And yeah, that contract is already starting to age well for the Canucks.
Last question, Harm. It's our poll question today. On paper, are the Canucks better today than they were at the start of the playoffs?
I'd say they're better up front. They are slightly worse on the back end. Overall, I don't know if they've improved yet, but I also look at the challenge that Patrick Alvin and Jim Rutherford had going into the offseason. Unless Guentzel was going to fall into their laps or Sam Reinhart, there wasn't really a realistic path for them to improve this offseason, given the number of pending UFAs that they had. And they had some cap flexibility, but not enough to spend a ton on all of those roster areas. So step one is always make sure you don't get worse. So They've done that. All the contracts in my mind, like some of them I didn't fully agree with, like Myers is probably a year too long for my taste. And I'm a little bit, I have some question marks about whether Desharnais can live up to his contract, but ultimately everything they did was responsible and within reason. And they've left themselves with dry powder in that they didn't spend any assets on the trade market. So between now and the trade deadline, they've positioned themselves to make additions to this roster. So overall, when I look at the challenge of the offseason and how difficult they had it decisions-wise and avoiding the landmines of the Lindholm and Zadorov extensions as well, I think Alvin and Rutherford have done a pretty good job of positioning the Canucks to be competitive for the playoffs again. And if they show that, okay, we're on the cusp of being a contender, then they've left themselves trade chips to acquire that top four defenseman or that extra centerman that can put them over the top.
1,000,000% right, Harm. That's why he's king of all media, Blake. I feel almost identical to that answer.
Gun for hire.
One little quibble, but for the most part, I'm in lockstep with you, my friend. Great stuff, Harm. Thank you for the time here today. We'll be reading in The Athletic, and you keep Quadrelli in check. Okay.
I will.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the net. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Joined now by John Shannon, former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, the co-host of the Bob McCown podcast. Happy belated Canada Day to you, good sir.
You too, boys. Hope it was a nice one.
Yeah.
Were you stuck just following on the computer, or were you out playing golf?
No, we were here. Yeah.
No, honestly, Canada Day.
There wasn't much enthusiasm there, Blake.
No, well, you see, here's the thing. You work Canada Day for the umpteenth time in a row, John. Anyways, enough media wine. What did you make of what the Canucks did in free agency?
Well, I'm a Jake DeBrusk fan. I have been for a long time. I think that there was a time in Boston he didn't get a fair shake. I think he was in a much better position playing for Jim Montgomery than he was Bruce Cassidy. So from that perspective, I think that what the Canucks got was somebody that is going to pay the price and going to put the puck in the net, and everybody's going to enjoy having Jake around. So it's to me, it's a win-win. Good for Jake and good for Vancouver. So that's a positive. As far as some of the other stuff, I don't know enough about Sherwood to talk about what Sherwood is, but every team needs depth. Every army needs soldiers. And so I suspect that that's where that fit in. And, a couple of the guys, including Vinny Desharnais on the back end, I think that Desharnais will, he's a good, solid worker. He's got a great attitude. He was, the classic case of great in the room. But he's still a work in progress.
Now, the Canucks needed an elite winger for Elias Pettersson. Jake DeBrusk. Not an elite winger, but a good winger. But can he become more elite-ish with Elias Pettersson alongside?
That's a good question, Blake. Listen, DeBrusk can score. And is that what you need the elite winger to do? And, really show off Pettersson's playmaking abilities? Then Jake DeBrusk can do that. The one thing that, like Jake DeBrusk is closer in many ways to the style of play that JT Miller plays. Not a centerman, but Miller doesn't play center all the time either. But Jake's not afraid to be physical, not afraid to get in the corners. He still has a great deal of speed. So I think that if Pettersson can put the puck on his stick, and I see no reason why DeBrusk can't be a 35 goal scorer in the National Hockey League.
John, interested in your comment about the difference for DeBrusk from Cassidy to Montgomery. Would love if you explain further on that, and then maybe also tell us, this is a kid who scored 16 goals in 70 games as a rookie, 27 in 68 the next year. Mm-hmm. And yet seemingly we have heard his name in trade rumors for years here. So help us fill in the gaps there and explain those situations.
Well, I can't explain the trade rumors other than he and Bruce Cassidy were not the best of friends. There just was it was an oil and water scenario. And I think that it was an opportunity for Jake when Jim Montgomery showed up to prove that he can be a proven two-way winger in the National Hockey League. And I think for the most part, he did that. There were lots of times where coming off injury when Bruce was coach that they would throw Jake right back to the Wolves. And I think there were some times it wasn't really fair on Jake's part to be that extra guy all the time. Sometimes coaches and players don't mix. And that was just, I think, the case between Cassidy and DeBrusk. And Jake has been looking for long-term security for a while. And, kept, the last couple contracts in Boston were just bridge deals. So this to me is an indication that the Canucks have a great deal of confidence in him. And he liked the setup in Vancouver. How could you, with the way that Jake DeBrusk plays the game, how could you not want to play for Rick Tocchet?
Right. It's a perfect mix. He also gets to come with a couple of buddies. Well, I assume buddies from the Boston Bruins and Derek Forbort and Danton Heinen. That also makes a dressing room swap a little bit easier when you've got immediately familiar faces in the room.
I think that's fair. But if anybody knows Jake, he's got a perpetual smile on his face.
Yeah.
He will become a media darling. There's always, he loves talking to people. He comes by it naturally. Louis got the gift of the gab, and so does Jake. So I think it's a win-win. I really do. I think it's good for Jake to get back into a Canadian market. And I think it's good for the Canucks to improve their, I was going to say depth, but that's not fair. When there's an expectation he has to score goals now. Yep. I know he can do it. And I obviously that Patrick and Jimmy think he can do it as well.
When you say Desharnais is a work in progress, explain there, sir.
Yeah. Listen, by the way, he's usually the tallest guy on the team. Now, I don't think he's the tallest guy on the team. But this has been a long journey for Vincent Desharnais to get to the National League. He worked his tail off. He still makes a couple of mistakes in his own zone, which is one of the reasons why during the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Oilers elected to put him in the press box a couple times. But that said, he's physical. He's not afraid to mix it up. He does have that great Condor-like reach that coaches like. I think if he can spend some time with Adam Foote and with Sergei Gonchar, like he did with Paul Coffey, he will be a better hockey player. And so, from that perspective, it's one there where is he a 5'6" for Vancouver? Yeah, probably a 5'6" for Vancouver, but he certainly gives them depth. And he's another presence on the ice when he's there, and he's very physical. So but he's, his time in the National Hockey League is relatively short, guys. Yeah. And so from that perspective, he still needs to learn how to play the NHL game, and he's going to need that tutoring from Adam and Sergei to make it work.
Is he a fight, intimidate, protect his teammates type of guy?
Oh, yeah. No question. I mean, we're talking, if anything happens to one of the slighter guys, there's a face wash coming. There's a, big arm groping around you in the scrum. And he's a great teammate, and he's good for chemistry. I have no qualms about that when it comes to what Desharnais can add. Vinny was one of those guys around the room at Edmonton, always had a smile on his face, always had a positive attitude. And you can't, and I think that's one of the reasons why this summer there was a lot more interest in him than in previous years.
We've been talking for a while about how the NHL is just getting big again, because a lot of these big guys can move. A lot of them, not all of them. The Canucks have a massive blue line, John. Yeah. It looks like a blue line from the late 90s, for heaven's sakes. And the presumption is that all of them can move. We know Myers and Soucy. We've seen them up close. Desharnais, we got a good baptism of because of the 7-game series.
Sure.
But still, it'd be interesting to see him over an 82-game set. And then there's Forbort, of course, as well. 6'4", the smallest of the four guys there on the blue line. Is it too big? Do you see what Rick Tocchet and Patrick Alvin have in mind here? What do you think?
I don't think it's too big ever. All you have to do is go back 5 years and look at that defense for the St. Louis Blues that won the Stanley Cup. And it was Kenny Hitchcock who had them before they won the Cup that gave them the nickname Condors. But the Edmondsons of the world, the Parekos, Alex Pietrangelo was one of the smaller guys at 6'4". So when you're trying to defend in a certain way, if you have size and reach, you can be different. And you're right. Tyler Myers has been reinvented. I mean, and he's a great puck moving defenseman, and now his defensive game seems to be back where everybody expected it to be. Same with Carson Soucy. I mean, so I as long as these guys can maintain their mobility, and by the way, for a guy 6'7", Desharnais is pretty mobile. I don't think size should ever be an issue for this defense, being too big. I don't think you can ever be too big in the National Hockey League.
There's a sense they might need a puck mover. Do you think any nibbling around the edge? They got 8 signed defensemen because they've got Jolson and Friedman theoretically as well. Do you think there's a chance they're looking for one more puck moving defenseman, or do you think they're set?
Well, beyond Quinn and Hronek, who obviously are the number one pair, it would not surprise me that we see a little bit of movement still, and I think this is true for the whole league. The $1 billion that was spent yesterday, $1 billion. It's crazy. I think people now are going to take that step back, judge where they are. How close did they come to meeting all their goals? There are going to be teams that now are over the cap, and you can be over the cap by 10% in the summertime. So they're going to have to move some bodies, and it would not surprise me that if one of those guys is a puck-moving defenseman, the Canucks find a way to stick their nose into a conversation.
Or one of the other things we've been talking about is, if you want a puck-moving defenseman on both of the top 2 pairings, you split up Hughes and Hronek.
I'll tell you what, they are so good together. I'm not sure you want to compromise that. I think, listen, schedule came out today, so we're 2.5 months. We'll buy Patrick and the team some leeway to try to find a way to get another puck moving defenseman into the line. It wouldn't surprise me though.
Let's turn our attention to the draft over this past weekend at the Sphere in Las Vegas, John, because Blake and I thought it was a marvelous, and you don't always say this about the NHL, the award show, but Blake and I thought it was a marvelous live event, looked fantastic. And boy, if that's it for the live in person on the floor draft, they went out with a bang. What did your trained eye make of it, my friend?
Well, first of all, the NHL. So in my time at the league, we tried to get the time between picks down to 3 minutes. We could never do that. Teams always wanted 5. The networks always wanted 5. And we could never get the teams to get up there and just make a pick. They always had to say hello to the Carolina Ale House draft party, and everybody who's in 6 kids. It's just all the crap that drove you nuts, and your 3.5-hour draft ended up being 5 hours. Well, they accomplished a lot of that. So a lot of the housekeeping stuff was really well done. The teams were told that they were not allowed to do certain things. They were only supposed to be allowed 2 people on the dais. Some fudged it a little bit, but it still worked to everyone's benefit. Sphere is an unbelievable place. I'm not sure it transposed to television as well as they thought it would. It didn't for me, but I have a bias. All that stuff, which was magnificent to see, is still the background. It's not the foreground, it's the background. And the real story of the draft for me are the Macklin Celebrinis of the world. The Caden Lindströms of the world. Those are the guys that make the show. And so from that perspective, I have a bias that it was good. It was great. I'd love to know the bill. If the 3 of us tried to rent Sphere for a day, it's $450,000 a day. So I think that, you have to look at the accounting and say, well, I'm sure the league didn't pay that because Mr. Dolan is a shareholder in the National Hockey League. But it was good. I thought the 2 productions, I watched both ESPN and Sportsnet. I thought both productions were tight. They were well done. We saw more players. So life was pretty good that way. I have no issues with what the draft was on Friday night. There's
no question the Sphere, the whole immersive experience is supposed to be for the people sitting in the seats. So the curved screen and stuff like that, it's not catered to the TV audience, but I saw it as looking bigger and fancier than it ever has before.
Then they accomplish their goal, Blake. Yeah. Then they accomplish their goal. I mean, that's there's a pragmatic side, and there's a hey, watch us now side, and the watch us now side was good. I mean, I have no issue.
You got to put on the nice bracelet, and necklace, and look fancy.
I'm just glad that the Rangers were able to make a splash in the house that Dolan owns with the 30th overall EJ Emery, a defenseman from the U.S. national team.
Just wait, he's going to be amazing. He's going to prove you wrong.
Rangers are allowed to trade their pick this year.
Now, don't be picking on the New York Rangers. They're just one of 32.
Right.
One of 32 teams just eking out a meager living.
Trying to do it, yeah.
Finished in the conference final, but had that first round pick to make the splash at 30th overall for Mr. Dolan at the Sphere. Good deal.
Straight out of Compton, EJ Emery.
Schedule's out today, John. And it's, of course, a very, very tricky matrix. First and foremost, how many teams are they actually able to satisfy in terms of their preferences and requests?
Probably in the 100th percentile, none. But I suspect that most of the teams who provide dates, and these dates who had been provided, 18 months ago. And the team provides 50 dates, and they have to work around that. So it's been an arduous task and a tough one when you consider that probably satisfying the 5 networks that exist between the two countries, TVA, Rogers, and now Amazon in Canada, and TNT and Disney in the United States. It's not a simple thing to do, but there are going to be teams that are going to be upset with road trips. There are going to be teams upset with back-to-backs. But lots of teams don't want to play a lot of games before Christmas. You look at the New Jersey schedule. I can guarantee you the New Jersey schedule is backdated heavily, whereas most of the Canadian teams are top-heavy for between now and Christmas Day. So it's a tough one to do. It really is. It's not a fun deal, but in the end, it's everybody's excited about the schedule. You can plan your vacations. You can plan everything you want to do, and we go from there. Plus, a 12-day break to play an international tournament in February.
It's just unbelievable when you scroll over and you see that massive block in February. You're just like, wow, that is a long time off for a large portion of the league.
Fellas, the Canucks last game is April 16th.
Is there? Oh, no. Listen, we're going to be in that that June 20 to 24 end of year again. 16 million people watch Game 7. 16 million people watch Game 7. And so if people are saying, well, you know what, nobody's interested in hockey.
Yeah.
It's good. It justified what the schedule will look like, at least till the end of the collective bargaining agreement.
Come on, Shannon. Some of that was based on the matchup of the Cup final as well, right? Like if that's Vegas, Florida, I don't think you're getting those sorts of numbers. But that's listen, Rogers has been waiting 10 years for a matchup. I know. I mean, just to get a Canadian team in, and you poo-pooed us on moving the schedule up, but LeBron reported this week the next CBA could be 84 games, fewer preseason games, and start right at the beginning of October to get on out by June 10th or so.
I will believe it when I see it.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, this is real estate now in June that, everything's gone off without a hitch. Game. Well, awards were a hitch. A game, awards, draft, free agency. And the next, at least for the next year or two, there won't be travel involved for the draft for the teams. It'll all be done remotely. So it's not going to be as rushed. Saturday night, teams trying to get out of Sphere to go to the airport to get back for free agency. Some teams actually stayed in Winnipeg or stayed in Vegas, like Winnipeg.
We mentioned that Winnipeg and Washington both said to hell with it. We'll lose too much time. Hey, draft free agency, players signing contracts with new teams while still drunk on champagne from the parade. That was a new one this year.
Yeah.
Lastly, you wanted in on the Hall of Fame.
Well, I used to be a real believer in the Hall system, and I used to respect it. Jim Gregory, who was a dear friend, was the chairman for a long time, and he convinced me that this was the way to do it. And but I've now changed. I mean, Alexander McGillney, who was nominated and did not get enough votes, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I think it's time now that we have a lot more transparency and understanding of how the nominations work, how the voting works, so that we can ensure that those people who deserve to be in the Hall of Fame get to the Hall of Fame. And, the politics of it have to stop. To stop.
Can you defend the Coley Campbell nomination?
Yeah, I can. First of all, is Colin Campbell is a friend of mine. I make no bones about it. Mm-hmm. But Colin Campbell has had more impact in the last 2.5 decades to the success of the game and the speed of the game and the way the game has played than anyone else. Anyone else, Blake. And anybody who doubts that he doesn't deserve to the Hall of Fame should be ashamed of themselves because they haven't done the due diligence to understand his impact and importance to the game. I know he's an executive vice president and whatever, where the title is long as Pittsburgh, but Colin Campbell has worked his ass off to make this game better.
I guess I will sit here in my shame then, John Shannon, because this is a person who abused his power as director of officiating or director of hockey operations to intimidate officials in his charge to benefit his son's club. That right there.
No, I'm sorry. That is absolute.
Let alone the Hockey Hall of Fame. It's all there in emails, John. It's all there in emails.
I am telling you right now.
I guess
Matt, listen, Matt, we can
miss that day.
We can agree to disagree. Colin Campbell deserves to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I will stand up for that for the rest of my life.
What do you when you say politics, what do you mean? That the politics at the Hall? What do you mean by that?
Well, I think personal opinions and vendettas of people being kept out of the Hall exist, and they have existed constantly for the last 30 years. I think that when the cycle of voters changes, you get a new editorial philosophy in what that 18-person panel votes on. There were players that were not allowed in because they were treated poorly in a post-game event, and so the person never forgave them. And that's not right. The Hockey Hall of Fame deserves to be a place where the best players, best builders, best female players, and officials are honored for their contributions to the game, not because they were a prickly personality or because we didn't like the way that they got interviewed one day after a game. That's not right.
Yep.
That's not right.
On that point, we can agree, Mr. Shannon. Thank you for the...
We can always agree on disagreeing too. So it's good.
Mm-hmm. Have a great week, John. We'll catch up next week.
Talk to you, boys. Have a great weekend.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.